everybody, welcome back to The Rising. I'm Melanie Penn. This is where we talk about the resurrection. And today we have with us Mark Meynell. Mark Meynell is a pastor, writer, and teacher. Until very recently, he was associate director of Langham Preaching, and he's now still involved with Langham, doing freelance projects. He's been a chaplain for the government of the United Kingdom. He's an ordained minister in the Church of England, very accomplished, and was previously on the senior ministry team of All Souls Church with John Stott. You can find Mark on Triptych Pod. It's a podcast about the arts and theology, which is just about my favorite two subjects together. Mark and his wife, Rachel, have 2 children, and I'm so pleased to have him on The Rising. I love to ask everyone, when did you first believe that the resurrection actually happened?
When I was 18, it was the February of 1989. I heard some talks about the Christian message, which I guess I'd heard some of that stuff before, but the penny dropped because this guy was talking about God. Well, anyone can talk about God, but he was talking about Jesus in a way that indicated pretty clearly that he knew him. And that was very odd to me. I don't think I'd clicked that that was a thing before. And it was in the next weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months, where I began to recognize that actually this Jesus is alive. And so then, you have to say, well, how is he alive if he was killed on a cross? He came to life. So it was in those first few months. I can't name a date, but that was definitely the process very early on.
And then tell everyone a little bit about how you became a theologian.
It was just very gradual. I think when I was at university, I wasn't studying theology, but I just started, helping out, doing some Bible studies, interactive Bible studies. People were saying, hey, you're quite good at this. Maybe you should think about doing it a bit more. And I started reading, and then it just sort of gradually picked up. And I think I'm one of the least ambitious people I know. So I never have a plan. I don't sort of have a grand design for 10 years' time. I can't plan things 10 minutes' time. So it just evolved. And I started doing more studies. Then I did a master's, and I did a doctoral ministry. And I suppose that means some people would regard me as a theologian. Although, of course, every believer is a theologian.
Right. Say more about that.
Well, I think theology is not about sort of pumping your brain with data and knowledge. I think it was Luther who said, experience makes theology. In other words, it's about knowing God, knowing Christ, knowing what he's done for us. That is actually the engine room, if you like, of theology. It's got to come out of personal experience of knowing what it is, in essence, to be forgiven, to be saved. And it becomes your own experience.
Yes, I've never thought about that before. Experiences kind of create your functional theology.
Right. Because
and
otherwise
bad experiences can give you bad theology if you don't read them through the right lens or have support or people to help you.
Absolutely. It's a dialogue between the two. Yeah. And so it's never just one. It's never just experience or just historical theology. This is what Fred Jones thought in that year or whatever. It's a constant dialogue. And actually, that's how we live life. That's how you get to live in a new city. It's a kind of dialogue with what you know and what you don't know, and other people who know stuff, and you share stuff, and it's sort of accumulative like that.
Your book, Life After Life, which I got to read. Thank you so much for sending it to me.
Thank you for reading it.
Because I asked for it. I asked, just so everybody knows, I did ask for it. You spend time in the first part of the book talking about death. Actually an exposition on death. And if you remember this, you make a little comment about, was death a protective measure that God imposed after the fall? What is death, theologically speaking? Because without death, we have no resurrection.
Not least because if we're talking about God who is eternal, how does death fit into the picture with God at all? I think there's a sense in which in Genesis 3, the coming of death and the restrictions for the man and the woman to eat from the tree of life. So people often forget there are 2 trees.
Yes.
So the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the temptation, the allure of that is you'll be like God. And that's a whole sort of thing there. But restriction to the tree of life is basically now you've got little gods walking around the earth who are basically not aligned to the creator. They are wanting to usurp the creator. And if you have lots of little gods and goddesses wandering around the earth trying to do their own thing and impose their own will forever, then that is tragedy compounding tragedy.
Right.
And so the flashing sword at the gate to Eden is to say you have no more access to that. Because apart from anything else, you as human beings simply do not have the capacity to function as gods, to function as the arbiters of morality. And so there's no way you can go there. But it's a tragedy because we were not meant to suffer that. But then we were not meant to live like God. We were meant to live in flourishing under God, who has our best interests at heart. That's the tragedy of it. You are cutting yourself off from your source of life and flourishing.
Yeah, it's interesting that the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's almost like God was saying from the very beginning, there are some things you're not designed to know.
Correct.
You can't, I didn't make you to hold all this information. Kind of like you don't give a child information that's too complex for a child. It would confuse the child.
Correct.
Depress the child. In a very elementary way, it's that same thing.
I think that's exactly right.
And then, okay, I think in the book, after making that point about gods and goddesses walking around after eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that God had to impose death, had to impose a limited lifespan for humans so they wouldn't do too much damage. I was like fascinated by that as a theory.
If you put it into sort of political form, this works its way out into things like checks and balances because we don't trust people to be able to wield even within
it's a term
human
limit.
terms.
It's God put term limits on humans.
Absolutely, because of our rebellion.
That's so interesting. Okay, so drop yourself into the resurrection narrative. Is there a moment in the Gospels? It's funny to me that we don't get that much information about Jesus rising from the dead. It's like the Gospels are, 20 chapters, and then we get 2 that are about Jesus's resurrected life. But is there a moment in any of the Gospels that's the most compelling to you of Jesus's resurrected life on earth?
I think it's pretty clear to me personally, but also in terms of one of the things that makes the gospel magnetic is the restoration of Peter. But it's fascinating because at one level you could argue that the reason, well, apart from anything else, Peter had the humility to say, no, this is a story that even though I come off really badly here, the church needs to know.
Wow. Right.
So, some of the aspects of it could only have come from him, Jesus is saying. And the restoration is saying, look, I knew about this all along, but I still want you. And, the 3 times being asked, do you love me?
Yes.
Is clear what's actually going on there. Peter's hurt by it. Of course he is. But I think he's recognizing also what this means. He's given me another go. Mm-hmm. And of course, in the gospel, we're forgiven 70 times 7. So the whole point of that is you lose count. It's not that you suddenly get to close to...
Not just 3 times.
Yeah, I know.
Not just 3 times.
Okay, we're nearly, whatever it is, 449 or I don't know, whatever. I hate maths, so I can't do that. But, we're not getting to the end of it and saying, I'm close to the edge, I'm going to fall off. No, it's like he loses count. He keeps on having us back. Mm-hmm. And that's the grace of the gospel. But I tell you, the moment that I love more than any, and you only get it in just a fleeting moment in Luke's account, because there's Peter in the middle of the night, it's cold, they're all warming by the fire, and it's just a fleeting moment, and you can only see this as the result of the sovereignty of Jesus, because he's completely in control of this whole thing where it looks as though he's doomed. Well, it just so happens after the 3rd denial, before you hear the crowing in the distance, or no, just immediately after, Luke's account says, and Jesus looked straight at Peter.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And maybe he's being escorted by guards through the colonnade to his next round or whatever it is. But it's just that fleeting moment. And so you sort of, and Luke doesn't tell us anything else about it, but it's like, I imagine, what is the look on Jesus's face? Is it anger? Or is it disappointment? Is it, I told you so? Well, I don't think that's in keeping with why he tells him at all. Although it might be, Jesus got angry. Jesus was disappointed with people. But I think at its heart, what's going on there, he's looking at him, and it's a look of love. And I think in the end, that's what breaks Peter's heart. Because it's like, you knew this was going to happen, Lord, and I'm just gutted that it has. I'm so sorry. I know what I've done. And Jesus looks at him and says, I love you.
Every world religion, even mythology, secular theories of living, can talk about death and resurrection. The idea of like death, rebirth, winter, spring, you know. But Christianity is utterly unique.
Yes.
Because
it is a resurrection, not a resuscitation. So it's not something that's repeated again and again. So it's not a cycle.
Right. You don't die again. You die, rise again, and stay.
It is a resurrection because he doesn't come back out of death. He goes through death, never to do it again.
Never again.
And it is bodily. That's the clincher. It is not a concept. It's not a ghost. It's not an idea. It's a bodily resurrection. So his feet get muddy again in the sand and the mud. This is his body is back again, having been kaput.
What does that mean for us that in Christianity, bodily resurrection is so fundamental to Christianity?
So historically, from time to time over the centuries, we have kind of avoided and tried to escape the fact that we are embodied. And bodies are embarrassing things. Bodies make nasty smells, and they produce nasty
weird noises
things.
And
noises, fluids, yucky stuff, and then they go wrong, and bits fall off, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not ideal. If you were inventing life, would you do a body like this? Perhaps not. And, the ancient Greeks, they were very ashamed of the body, or maybe not necessarily ashamed, but it just seems somehow lower. And so they aspired to the so-called spiritual as being a higher plane.
Right. Like that you have the material and the immaterial. Immaterial is higher.
Yeah, that's right. And if there's something to do with the gods and God, that's going to be beyond bodies. The idea that they would get all sort of mucky and bodied, that just didn't compute at all. Now, that can lead in two different directions. It can either mean you avoid doing anything with the body. That's a sort of asceticism and saying, right, I'm not going to have any pleasures or anything. Or it goes completely the opposite direction, say, it doesn't matter what I do with my body, and so I can be completely hedonistic and do whatever I like with my body, just whatever pleases me. Now, the Christian basically cuts out both options completely and says, no, God made you embodied, so it's in our createdness, but in the gospel, it's also in our redeemedness, that we are redeemed with bodies as well, because Jesus was. And if we are in Christ, we will have what he had. And that completely goes against the grain of what a lot of people think Christianity is all about. They think, I want to go to heaven and I'm going to sit on a cloud with a rainbow strap guitar and wear sandals and it's like that forever. And they say, oh, that sounds really boring. And quite frankly, it is utterly boring. I don't want to do that. No, Jesus was embodied. And so the whole challenge, say to Thomas, put your fingers here, is like saying, I'm not a ghost and I'm alive. And we're here, and then they're on the beach, and he's eating fried fish with his teeth, because he's got teeth. And he's got a stomach, and he eats stuff. And it's like, no, he is embodied. Now, in the resurrection, you've got to say he is embodied and some. So there's aspects to his new body that, whoa, we didn't see that coming. So somehow he can go through doors that are closed.
Superhero level.
Yeah. What's all that about? I really don't know what that means, but it means something. And so you got to say he is not less than embodied. He's just somehow more than embodied. So it's embodiedness plus, 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 without sin, without decay, without brokenness. And yet, here's the thing. You read in the book of Revelation in places, his scars are still visible.
In Acts chapter 2, Peter says Jesus suffered the agony of death. And in your book, you talk about the word agony that's used there. Can you tell us a little bit about what that word actually is and what that means?
The word that Peter uses is a very odd one. And I think people listening to him, their ears were suddenly sort of pinged up and think, what? And it's a word that is very specific for the horrific pains of childbirth. And sometimes, extended. It could go on for hours. And of course, in the ancient world, this was one of the most dangerous moments of a person's life,
right.
of a woman's life.
Right. Women didn't survive.
Right. There's something extraordinary but positive about this word as well, because it is an agony that results in something amazing when everything goes according to plan. It leads to a new life, literally. And that's, I can remember holding my son when he was like 30 seconds old. And it's like suddenly my life is radically changed. So is his, because he's now alive. He's now 27, which is just sort of weird. But there I was holding this tiny little sort of thing. And it's like, well, where did that come from? Now there is a whole other life here. So it's a very special context. And for Jesus' death to be given the analogy of those pains for childbirth, I think is clearly intentional and very wonderful. It's saying the result of this, it's not suffering as an end, it's suffering as a means to something utterly beautiful and miraculous, a new life.
New life for everyone.
Right. And it's like, this is why he did it. This is the part of the glory set before him, that he endured the suffering, the horror, the agony of the cross.
I have one other question, and it's kind of a funny one.
Good. I like funny ones.
Can you elaborate on this statement?
Uh-oh.
One common mistake here is to assume that the resurrection proves Jesus must be the Messiah or divine.
Ha-ha.
Because you're so right. Other people had been raised. Jesus had raised other people from the dead.
Right.
The dead coming to life again was not a new concept in the New Testament.
Right. Lazarus, as far as I know, nobody thought Lazarus was the Messiah. He was dead. The little girl who died, she was dead. And Lazarus, you could say, is strictly speaking not a resurrection, it's a resuscitation. He comes back to life and he will have to die again one day. But in pretty much every other sense, it is a resurrection. He was emphatically dead. The sisters knew it. Jesus knew it, and he did this on purpose to say this is special. But nobody starts a campaign to make him Messiah king. Mm-hmm. So the issue is, what did Jesus say in advance? What has he promised is going to happen? And that is what is special. It's one thing to be brought back to life, but it's another thing to say, look, folks, this is going to happen in 6 weeks on the Friday, and then that's going to happen on the Sunday. You mark my words, this will happen. And then when it happens, you think, ooh, okay, there's something pretty amazing going on here. Let's think about all his other words, because what else did he say?
Right.
It gives him an authority.
And it's obvious when, like in Lazarus, for instance, it's obvious Jesus calls him forth from the grave. Right. But Jesus, on his own power from nothing, rose again. From nothing. Wow. What is that? There's like ex nihilo or something like that?
Ex nihilo from yeah, I mean, it's in a way, yeah, you could say that. I mean, it's like he created the universe from nothing and he brought new life from nothing. But it's also then amazing to think, well, Paul will say, well, the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead lives in us. The same Spirit.
Oh my gosh, let's in there. Please say more about that. That same Spirit was poured out on us,
right,
and accessible for us.
Well, that is Paul at his most encouraging, edifying, reassuring. And if we are Christian, we are bound to Jesus. We are united with him. He plays around with being in Christ, Christ in us all the time. It's sort of a seesaw between the two things. You cannot be more united to Christ. And as if we needed more, kind of like the glue is his Spirit, the Spirit of Jesus, the same Spirit who raised Jesus from the dead, is living in us. And so the moments when I most doubt that there's going to be life, the moments when I feel overwhelmed by the tidal waves that seem to just swallow me. Hey, but I don't feel like this necessarily, but I have him, his Spirit, living within me. And if he did it for Jesus, how much more is he going to do it for little old us?
Amen. Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's an absolute joy.
May you always know the Spirit of the risen Christ is
Amen.
in you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Rising podcast as we look further into the resurrection of Jesus. Did you know The Rising is also an album? The Rising is an album that I wrote that tells the story of Christ's resurrection. Each song on the album is written from a different perspective of someone who was actually there at the resurrection. Each guest on The Rising also has a perspective. And you know what? So do you. I would venture to say that your perspective is the one that I'm most interested in. Would so love it if you'd subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and you can find new episodes on any of those platforms as well. If you want to get to know me better, you can find me on Instagram or go to melaniepenn.com and you can send me a message there. I make things for you, and I'm so glad that you are here for The Rising.